Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CBRS Migration 5 Keys to Success webinar by Airspan and ISP Supplies. With recent CBRS announcements, many manufacturers and network engineers are having to adjust their equipment and deployment practices to be compliant with new rules and regulations. It is crucial to deploy a custom-tailored equipment setup to address your specific network needs. That is why Airspan and ISP Supplies joined forces to bring you today's webinar. We will cover topics including equipment manufacturer comparison. We put them side by side to give you an accurate comparison amongst the most popular manufacturers for the U.S. market. Network planning and migration paths. We'll be going over RF planning, spectrum analysis, capacity planning, and much more. We have a lot to cover today, but before we get started, I would like to make a few mentions. First off, to Jennifer Whitney from Airspan for all of her creative direction and putting together today's slideshow presentation. Thank you very much. David Peterson, our senior engineer at ISP Supplies, will also be speaking today. He has over 20 years of experience in the wireless community and has a lot to bring to the table. Also, Matt Dorsey, Senior Director of Sales and Business Development at Airspan, also with over 20 years of wireless experience. So we have two extensively seasoned wireless engineers with us today with a lot of information to cover. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items. Connectivity issues. If you're having any issues, please refresh your browser. Also, we recommend using Google Chrome for optimal viewing. And we will also be emailing and posting a recorded copy of this webinar to our YouTube channel and social media, so make sure to follow us on there. If you have any questions, please submit your questions using the menu on the right bar, and we will address them towards the end of the slideshow presentation. And if by any chance we are not able to get to your question during the webinar, we will definitely be following up and posting all answers with a recorded version that we'll be putting up. On today's agenda, we're going to be covering the 5 keys of success: selecting the right equipment manufacturer, accounting for other business considerations, establishing network and planning migration paths, awareness of technical factors, and finding the ideal distributor, what to look for in a distributor. Also be going over Airspan's end-to-end CBRS solutions. And for today's attendees as well, we will have a special offer towards the end of the presentation that you can take advantage of. So to begin the 5 keys to a successful CBRS migration, we'd like to hand it over to David Peterson with the first topic of equipment manufacturer selection. David, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jonathan. And so I wanted to cover this with everybody. There's a lot of selections that we can get when it comes to CBRS equipment. And one of the more important things to look for is whether or not the manufacturer is well established in the market. Have they been around for long? What's some other important considerations are whether or not they're U.S. based. Do they have their manufacturer in China, or is it outside of China? In today's political environment, having manufacturer and ownership in China can potentially cause some problems for the operator down the line. And then most importantly, since the primary focus of this meeting is the look over LTE, do they adhere to the industry standards? Are they completely fully 3GPP compliant? Do they have a standardized EPC, or is it a hybrid system, as some of the manufacturers do? So in addition, you want to look at the business's history and overall experience in the market. Airspan has been around since '92. I personally have a good 12 to 15 years supporting Airspan. I've worked with their engineers extensively for well over a decade now, and they have well over 1,000 commercial deployments. As you can see, they're based in the United States in Boca Raton, as others are based in China or Israel or other such things. And then more importantly, you want to look at whether or not their product has been carrier approved. Not all of us have the ability to actually necessarily get a carrier roaming agreement, but if that's important to you, you want to look at the only approved vendor, which is Airspan, by all major carriers. No other LTE vendor in the WISP field has that capability. In addition, you want to look at their support. My personal opinion, my personal experience with Airspan support is I can typically get a guy within an hour or two inside of either an eNode B or an EPC if it's a Airspan supported EPC, to try to make sure that we can get everything back up and running in a very quick time. Other vendors have very limited support, and so you want to keep your eyes on the ability to get support when you need it to keep your customers happy and your business successful. When we start moving down into the CBRS, we want to start looking at RF planning. In past equipment selections, RF planning has been a little haphazard. One of the nice tools that Google has developed is the Google Network Planning tool, which has fantastic coverage. They have 0.1 to 3 meter clutter and the ability to check to see on a very precise level how well your deployments will go. It's always good to have a spectrum analysis. While LTE is very spectrally efficient, you do want to know if there's some noise out there and where it might be coming from. Using the Airspan Netspan product, you can actually see the noise floor at every port. So it can kind of give you an idea of exactly what's out there. Now, traditional spectrum analysis is probably not as critical as it used to be, as we will be given the channel regardless of the environment. But to know that there's some external noise is always important. Now, of course, we always want to look at capacity planning. With LTE and Airspan in particular, they have the ability to do N1 reuse, which means to use the channel, they can use the channel up to 3 times. It's built into the LTE protocol. And of course, they have the next release, they do have the 256 QAM down by 64 QAM up coming out. And in addition, all radios are either dual carrier or carrier aggregation, allowing you to scale. Now, when it comes to one of the things that the SAS is not going to really help us with, and that's system coordination. So we want to look at software optimized networking. What this does is it can help you plan your PCIs to the point where if you have PCI confusion or collision, it has the ability to adjust your PCI to a different PCI, allowing you to not have slow capacity or subscribers going offline. So that's an important consideration. And Airspan on all their product line has a fully working SON, including some advanced network optimization for dense networks. We get another slide. Thank you. And of course, there's some new deployment considerations that we want to keep in mind. We are now in the era of MIMO and massive MIMO. So you want to keep things like staying away from mechanically down tilt sectors, keeping your sector width low. So what we recommend is a 65-degree antenna on a 4-sector tower and a 90-degree antenna on a 3-sector tower. Between that and not down tilting, this will keep your side lobes from expanding out and interfering with your other antennas and keep your systems optimal. And because we're talking about MIMO and massive MIMO at this point, we are starting to have to report what the power spectral density of the equipment is to the SAS. And what this is, power spectral density is the measurement of the power at a 1 megahertz channel. And why that's important is that this actually will allow the FCC to adjust the power to keep interference down and keep the PAL holders from having problems with their channels, simply by making sure that vendors are not overdriving their amplifiers and keeping the appropriate power spectrum density, or PSD, for the radio. So this will be automatically set and is going to adjust the actual transmit power of the equipment according to what the FCC expects it to be at. And then, of course, one of the core components of LTE is the EPC. You want to keep an eye on. My recommendation is a local EPC, and the reason for that, besides having it locally where you have control over it, you don't have to worry about cloud outages, that sort of thing. You really want it to be a hardware-based EPC where the EPC functions are all on a separate piece of hardware. Software EPCs, where some vendors have taken portions of the EPC and loaded it onto the eNode B, or have a cloud connection. The S1 connection to the MME is the most critical component of LTE. The S1 is your control plane, which directly controls your data plane. So as you increase latency and or have potential packet loss on your control plane, your data plane suffers immensely. Now, as we begin to expand into the newer, later versions of LTE, we want to start looking at whether or not we want to stick with a Cat4 UE, a Cat6, or a Cat15 UE. And if you're going to increase the amount of capacity you have and the non-line of sight capabilities, you want to start looking into moving upstream to Cat6 or Cat15 UEs. Now, on the fortunate experience that I've had with Airspan is that they actually have the ability and will IoT or interoperability testing with existing UEs. So choosing an Airspan eNode B doesn't mean you have to yank out all the UEs from your field. And then, of course, getting into Cat15, where we have multi-carrier carrier aggregation, 8x4 MIMO, which is 8 transmit, 4 receive. On the UE, then you can have some additional non-line of sight. So you want to start thinking about UE considerations when you're picking your equipment choices. And of course, technically, you really want to keep an eye on what the FCC rated output power is. If you look at other systems out in the field, we've seen that on a head-to-head comparison, Airspan has beat pretty much every other competitor out there. They have the highest rated radio, which is 70 watts. Other manufacturers have somewhere between 21 and 44 watts of rated output power, which means that once the SAS takes over, the transmit power will be reduced to the appropriate levels. And of course, the management platform is pretty key. You want to have, if you want to have the ability to manage your own equipment on your own network, Airspan has Netspan, which is an excellent product. It's been around for a good 10 years. I've been using it pretty much since the beginning. It's a fairly inexpensive package. You license it per eNode B, and the license is actually yours for the life of the eNode B. So if some reason your server dies, you can actually contact Airspan, give them the serial numbers of your equipment, and they'll give you a new license. Other companies, the management platforms are fairly expensive and or come with a monthly subscription. So you want to keep that in mind. And then, of course, the domain proxy, which is key, critical to getting to the SaaS. The Airspan domain proxy, they have the eNode B domain proxy on the Netspan product. But the CPE get the report directly to the SaaS. They will have their own certificates, and there's no need for an intermediary domain proxy for them. Other companies, you have a specific domain proxy, either hardware-based on your network or cloud-based. So you really want to keep that in mind when you're making some decisions, as that's a crucial piece to CBRS. And then, of course, whether or not the company has certified all their CPEs or UEs. And of course, we know with recent experience, some manufacturers have had some problems with older UEs, and Airspan has 100% all certified UEs for their product line. Airspan, when it comes to EPC, and this is definitely one of the more critical components of your network. The EPC is the networking piece, and is the arguably as critical or more critical than the RF piece. Airspan is completely EPC neutral. They have some options, but as long as it's a standardized 3GPP EPC, they will be fully compatible. Other manufacturers have cloud-based, have a specific EPC that is proprietary, but Airspan is completely vendor neutral. And of course, the EPC costs are pretty critical. Airspan has a Druid EPC option, which is a layer 2 EPC, allowing for operators to actually have a IP address on the equipment behind the UE. And then, of course, they have their A-Core system, which is a fully mobile EPC option as well. And there's no monthly subscription. It's just a one-time. Once you pay for it, it's in-house, based on basically CentOS. And of course, distributor selection. I hope there's no mystery on who we hope you choose. We know you have a lot of choices out there. Tell you a little bit about us. As Jonathan said, I have 20 years of experience in the wireless field. I've been in IT since '92. So I've been involved in all aspects of what creates a successful WISP. In addition, we have Steve, the owner, who owned a successful WISP himself. We have other engineers in the house that have worked with WISP, for WISP, consulted to WISPs. Pretty much, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 years of engineering experience inside of ISP supplies. So we are experienced in pre-sales, deployment, post-deployment, and troubleshooting support. So we think we can be a great partner for your business. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Dorsey, and I thank everybody for their time.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Excited to be here today. I'm Matt Dorsey with Airspan, and I'll be going through some corporate slides to begin with to kind of give you an introduction to who we are, and then going into the actual radios equipment. And then David will come back in to talk about Netspan, our management system. So Airspan, as Dave mentioned, is based in Boca Raton, Florida. We are a US-based company and have 20 locations scattered around the world with over 800 employees currently. We've been in this business for 20 plus years, all the way back to the pre-WiMAX days. Lived through WiMAX and then the transition to LTE. and I've been doing this for a long time, and now build 4 and 5G radios primarily. We also purchased a company called Mimosa, which a lot of you may be familiar with, about 1.5 years ago, which makes a fantastic unlicensed 5 gigahertz point-to-multipoint product and a full line of microwave backhaul products as well. If you have questions on those products, the guys at ISP Supplies can help you with that as well. Over the years, through these different product iterations and evolution, we've won a number of different awards for our product design. Most recently, we won a GLOMO, and I can't remember what that stands for, but for some of our small cell designs. We have a long track record of working with tier 1 companies as well as the tier 2 and tier 3 folks out there today. Our largest North American customer is Sprint, with over 350,000 radios deployed in the Sprint network. We just recently released a press release on GoGo Wireless, based in Colorado, that provides ground-to-air Wi-Fi for airplanes, and we'll be helping them with a 5G product as we go forward there. Also, we have just launched our first 5G product in Japan with Rakuten Mobile, 28 gigahertz, 128 by 128 MIMO radio that is being deployed today. And then the other very large customer that we've worked with is Reliance Jio out of India, which is the largest LTE network in the world. We have a significant part of that network as well. The reason for mentioning these large customers, as we work with these tier 1 companies, it really drives the innovation and the evolution of what we do. And companies that are smaller, tier 2, tier 3 type companies can then take advantage of that evolution. Next slide. So we are designed in the US. All of our design work takes place in the US, UK, and Israel. And then manufacturing is split between, depending on the products, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Israel. We no longer build anything in China, so you don't have to worry about tariffs or, as David mentioned with the current political climate, any issues with where that product's being manufactured. Next slide. So just a few things, why Airspan? We build small cell and macro cell products, specifically the radio access network. We partner with numerous companies that build the Evolved Packet Core. We've got a couple that we really like that David mentioned, but if you have another solution that you're more interested in, we can work with anybody as long as they're standards-based EPC. We have the lowest cost per bit in the market, CapEx and OpEx. As I mentioned, 20 years of building wireless networks, and hundreds of thousands of small cells and macro cells deployed around the world. Next, please. So let's take a look at the hardware. So Airspan is a member of the CBRS Alliance and the Wind Forum. We have representation on both of those committees, and have had a big part of helping develop the CBRS platform with the FCC at this point. As far as the SaaS vendors, we've done full IoT with all of the major SaaS vendors out there: Federated, Google, Sony, CommScope. We are totally agnostic as to which SaaS vendor you go with. And the guys at ISP Supplies and our engineering team can help with the integration of the SaaS as you start to move forward in a CBRS deployment. And I guess one thing I didn't mention earlier, while we're talking about CBRS today, Airspan also builds radios in a number of different frequencies. Specifically, I want to mention band 41. We have a full suite of radios in small cell and macro cell in band 41. If anyone on the webinar has 2.5 gigahertz, let us know, and we can sure run you through a separate presentation individually. Next slide. So how do we fit into the network? So Airspan products and Mimosa products actually can help build an entire network from a metro urban type deployment all the way to more of a rural, more typical macro type of network, 140, 150 feet on a tower, to private LTE networks actually. So we have an indoor product that if anyone has an opportunity to work with a customer or one of your customers to build private LTE, we absolutely have products to help us do that today. Next slide. So the flagship radio currently in CBRS is our AirHarmony 4200. This radio is more of a traditional macro deployment. It's self-contained. There is no BBU. It's the RRU. Everything is combined into one eNode B. That's tower mounted. It's 4-port, 4 by 5 watt ports on it. So high power, 2 by 20 watt, 2 by 20 megahertz CA. So a total of 40 megahertz of available spectrum that can be deployed on this radio. We can do an external 2-port antenna, so you could actually split the radio, put two 2-port antennas and point them in different directions. If you have a tower site that you don't want to put an Omni on and you don't necessarily need 3 or 4 sectors, you can actually split this radio into 2 sectors with 2-port antennas. And all of our radios are 2 by 20 watt and dual carrier at this point. Next slide. So our small cell product, this is more of a 40 feet and down type of a deployment for densification. It's lower power, 1 watt per port. It's 2 carrier, 2 20 megahertz channels for a total of 40 megahertz of available spectrum to deploy on. It's great for densifying a network if you have a situation where you have a community like you all do, I'm sure, where you have 40, 60 foot tree canopy surrounding a town and you can't get in from the top down from the tower location at 140, 200 feet in. This is a great solution to go in and potentially use a hub home where you would mount this on top of a subscriber's home and then get the neighborhood around it. This is an external antenna product, so you could put any antenna on here that would work for you. Next slide. So this radio is going to be available end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter this year. And this is really kind of the next evolution for Airspan's CBRS line. This is a small cell form factor, but capable of providing the full 50 EIRP that's allowable by the FCC with an internal antenna, 17 dBi internal antenna. This radio will also be available connectorized. So if you want to put your own antenna on it, you can order it that way. And again, you could split this, go one antenna one direction, another 2-port antenna another direction. But very small form factor, but a lot of bang for your buck here. We'll put this on a tower at 150 feet, or you could put it on a pole and really push out some power to get to some near non-line of sight type customers. So this is exciting. We're looking forward to this. It's going to be at a very advantageous price point, and this will be out, like I said, end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter this year. Next slide. So the Air Velocity 1500, this is a full indoor eNode B. The entire radio, everything is the same specs as what you have seen earlier, as far as 220 megahertz channels for a total of 40 megahertz of available spectrum, 2 carrier aggregation. This can be mounted on a wall or on a ceiling, either way. And so if you have a large manufacturing facility that's a customer that wants to do a CBRS private LTE network, this is a great product for that. Next slide. And the AirSpot 1310. This is a Cat 6 unit. We do have a Cat 12 unit that will be the 1410 that will be available later. Currently, this is all of these products are FCC approved, with the exception of the AirSpeed 1030 that we just talked about, and that's in process as we speak. But the UE/CPE here is fully FCC approved and ready to roll. So this will be a very cost-effective outdoor unit that you can put up and deploy and be assured that it's going to work really well. Next slide. Am I done? I am done. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David and let him talk some more about Netspan and domain proxy.
Thanks, Matt. So Netspan is their, as they said, the management platform and the domain proxy. One of the cool features that they have added into their domain proxy is the ability for you to have a second copy of Netspan in the event of equipment failure, keeping your customers online. The Netspan product is a fully, I've been working with it for about 10 years now. So it's been in the field for quite a bit. It covers pretty much all their equipment. There are in the Airspan software, there are literally 100 different buttons that you could push. But what the Netspan product does for you is it allows you, they give you a basic set of settings that have been vetted and approved. And so then you don't actually necessarily push every button. But in the end, if you have a scenario where you need to do some tweaking and some troubleshooting, they've got that for you. Of course, they've got the full SNMP, they've got a REST API, they support SOAP, and you can upgrade your entire network at the click of a button. Including you can actually set in some times where you would only want the eNode Bs to be upgraded, keeping your system from having an outage in the middle of the day. The other cool thing that they've got with the Netspan product is the Airspan has a good 100 to 150 KPIs, or key performance indicators. So you can see things like, you can see the RF layer at the port, you can see noise at the port level, you can see the VSWR. So you'll know if maybe somehow somebody kinked or damaged a cable during the install. You can see UE throughput, you can see everything down to a very granular layer. So it's a really great product. It's based on Windows. It's basically a .NET product. So you do use a browser to work with it. So you can work with it on any computer, but it is a Windows-based product. So yep, perfect. So in the system, like I said, is a full FCAPS. So you've got full fault management. You can see active alarms, historical alarms. It's a database driven product, so you can have your history for as long as you've got hard drive space. You can tweak the interface any way you want. You can adjust the look. It is highly available. You can put it into it supports SAN, it supports high availability failover with more than one copy and one computer going at the same time. And of course, it's got pretty much every knob and button and information that you need to keep your network running well. In addition, as I said before, this is also the domain proxy. So they've got a really clean way to register your eNode Bs with the domain proxy. So here's just a quick diagram of that. Of course, as we said before, the UEs will attach direct. They will have their cert. And then your Netspan will be the domain proxy for your eNode Bs. And the cert will be put into that Windows server. So that's basically the add-on that we have to have for the CBRS. And it's a really clean, easy to use product. It's one of the better management platforms I've ever encountered. So then, of course, we've got our EPC options. We've got the Acor. We also have Druid. And Druid is one of the nicer FWA fixed wireless access platforms out there, giving you full control over every aspect of your network. As I said before, down to the device behind the UE, provided it does support bridge mode. So we can get you guys if you want, contact a salesperson, and we can sit down with the Druid guys, Altran guys, or even talk about Airspan if you want some more information about the cores that we have available. And I think that's it for me. Jonathan, I'll turn this over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, David and Matt, for going over all that information in detail. We did have a few questions roll in. We're going to go over a few of them here. If by any chance you submitted any questions and we're not able to get to them in today's webinar due to time constraints, we will be following up with follow-up emails and posts on social media as well, answering all of your questions. But one of them is, why would you see performance improvements with an external EPC versus an embedded EPC?
So with some of the manufacturers that are out there, the EPC is essentially, it has been written into the code on the unit itself. Other manufacturers have embedded little boards inside. So you have a little bit, you have a lack of power and a lack of memory and CPU that will impact the performance. In addition, with a cloud-based option, if you increase the latency on your control plane, on your S1 plane, it directly impacts the data plane. So having the ability to have an external EPC and not have it essentially attached inside as additional code will allow you to have much better improvement statistics. In the field right now, without the 256 QAM, we're seeing a full 100 megabits per second, upwards to about 105 I've seen in the field on the AirHarmony. And then currently in the testing for the 256 QAM and 2CA, we're seeing about 280 megabits per second. And as I said, that's going to be coming out here in probably the next 30 days.
Awesome. Pretty impressive numbers. Thank you. Next question is the firmware field tested before it is released?
So the firmware that's released, like right now, I do know that the firmware that I've been talking about with the 256 QAM version 17.5, that is in the field, fully operational, and Sprint's using it. But until such time as Netspan deems it stable enough for the general public, they will only release that on a select basis and never use your network as a beta tester. They have a full solution and partnership with the carriers who will do their beta testing for them for any new firmware that comes out. So yes, absolutely fully stable firmware and not deployed before they can fully support it in you.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question here. Is there a higher gain CPE coming in the future other than the 17 dBi one that Airspan currently has?
At this point, it looks like I think what you're going to see for the future is that the MIMO systems, like the 8x4 CPUEs that are coming out, you're going to see a lot more processing gain, not necessarily transmitter gain. But yeah, absolutely. Newer things are coming out all the time, and newer capacities as well. So absolutely.
Great, thank you, David. And that does conclude the question section here of today's webinar. Also, as you can see, if you have any questions or any network needs, if you need anything mapped out, or if you'd like us to take a look at your possible deployment location and see how Airspan will perform for you, please send us an email at sales@ispsupplies.com, or if you have any questions on anything covered in today's webinar. Also, as I mentioned previously, we do have a special offer for everybody attending the webinar today. So there's an ISP Supplies CBRS promo offer. It's an all-inclusive starter package that we put together for only $5,900, which includes your Airspan AirSpeed 1000, the small cell base station, Alpha Wireless 4-port Met panel antenna, low PIM cables with cold shrink and mastic, 5 CPEs with SIM cards, as well as 3 hours of one-on-one initial setup support with our one and only David also. So it's basically a really good really well put together package here. There's no purchase limits either. And we also have a special financing offer on the next slide here. We have teamed up with Leaf Finance Company to collaborate to offer flexible leasing options for customers or anyone on this webinar. As you may know from Leaf already, they do have many years of industry experience. They're pretty quick at getting you pre-qualified, and they have quite a few different financing terms available. So please reach out to us or reach out to Leaf directly and just let them know that you heard about their special offer on Airspan equipment today, and they'll be able to help you out. Also, we will be recording and uploading a copy of this webinar to our YouTube as well as a social media channel. So please make sure to follow and subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook, especially youtube.com/ISP Supplies or facebook.com/ISP Supplies. Also, we will be sending out email blasts with a recording of this webinar and any type of additional information that comes about as well. So make sure that you join our newsletter as well. So I'd like to thank everybody once again. Thank you, Jennifer, for putting together the slides and running through them here. Thank you, Matt and David, for going over all the information. And I'd like to especially thank everybody for taking time out of their busy day today to join us. Once again, if you have any questions, email us at sales@ispsupplies.com. And if you would like to wish everybody a great rest of your week, and God bless everyone.